And welcome back to the Daily Dribble podcast, guys. As always, I'm your host, Nick Samet, here returning for what is going to be a bumper episode. Now, it's been quite a few weeks now, a good month and a half since the season concluded. And normally around this time after the off-season's concluded, NBA free agency started to wind down, the news has started to dry up a little bit. It provides a great opportunity to recap the season that was. Today is going to serve as the first part of a two-part series going through and grading all 30 teams within the league based on the season that's been. Now, as is common practice here at the Daily Dribble, we're going to start with the Eastern Conference today, ripping through alphabetical order, just going through essentially an A to F system, and just kind of revisit the season that was. Before I get into that, though, a big shout out to both Stadium Scene and The Cover, continuing to showcase all my work here, as well as a whole host of other content creators in and around Australia, New Zealand, the US, and Canada. Very, very appreciative of all their continued hard work and support. It certainly doesn't go unnoticed. Guys, a tremendous week from you guys out in the socials this week across Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. The engagement was high. It was awesome. I spoke about the week prior, kind of been offline a little bit due to some phone technical issues. But bounced back this week, and it was great just hearing all your thoughts on everything that's gone on from the NBA and the NBL this week. So awesome to chat with you guys. Keep it coming this week. Would love to hear from as many of you as possible. Righty, we've got 15 teams to get through today. Let's not stand on ceremony. We're going to jump, as I said, into the East, and starting first and foremost with the Atlanta Hawks. Now, I've given them a C-. And if anyone's unfamiliar with how the grading system works here, essentially A, fantastic. A C is a pass mark. Like that's average. Smack bang in the middle, should I say. And F and D's and things of the kind are failures. So you'll certainly pick it up as we progress. Okay, Atlanta C-. They finished the season 10th with a 36-46 record. They bowed out in the play-in. Trey, 26 points, 3 rebounds, nearly 11 assists across the season. But outside of that, it was just another season. And I hate to use the word, especially this early into the piece, it was another season of mediocrity. Now, I just think they are in a real lull at the moment. The DeJounte Murray experiment hasn't worked out. He's now since been shipped to the Pelicans this offseason. It kind of, I guess, recalibrates them. Sadiq Bey also gone to the Wizards now. So they're essentially starting from the ground up, it would seem. Trae Young to lead this team, continue to lead this team. But for me, they just need a complete overhaul. As I said, the last couple of seasons, they've been like such a middling team, and it's quite disappointing to see. Like the talent they had at their disposal was befitting of a team that should have made the playoffs and was a chance of a first round kind of victory there. They couldn't have been further from that, hence a C-. They were probably lucky not to get a D+, but I've ripped through with a C- there for the Hawks. Let's progress to our NBA champions, the Boston Celtics. They received an A+ grade, and deservedly so. They were so incredibly dominant from start to finish. They had 64 wins across the regular season. And to be perfectly honest, it didn't really feel as if they broke a stride throughout that time. It was, I used the reference quite a bit this season that like they were in first gear. And even across their playoff run, they didn't look as if they really had to kind of flex too much muscle. I think bringing in Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis there, it just took them to a whole nother level. And granted, the last couple of seasons, they've been banging on the door. They've looked like a team that's, on the periphery of getting over that hump with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum at the helm. But bringing in, as I said, Drew and KP, it just took them to another level. And the scary part is that they've locked this core up. This is a team, as I said, that didn't really break stride. They've kept that core intact. They're going to be very, very hard to stop next season and the next couple of seasons thereafter. A+, and I don't think anyone could have a qualm with that one. Before I get into the next one, I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to disagree with a lot of what I've got to say, but guys, I would love to hear your thoughts. As I said, hit up the socials this week, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong and what grades you would have given. Would love to hear. Okay, let's go to our third team, the Brooklyn Nets. I've given them a D. Now, it was a funny old year in Brooklyn. They showed flashes early, and to be fair, I thought Cam Thomas, I'd penciled him in for sixth man of the year, most improved player. He really set the season alight early, as did Mikal Bridges for that matter. Kind of had me thinking they were a playoff hopeful team, play-in team. This wasn't the case at all, and they finished the season with a 32-50 record. I thought a lot of this team stagnated early. Claxton in particular, Ben Simmons was essentially a shooting star. Blink and you'll miss him. And, even outside of having a poor season, which it was, 32-50, a poor season by anyone's standards, there was little indicators of actual positivity out of it. Teams can have a poor season record-wise, but there might be some young players that really elevated their game or, something of the kind, something to hang your hat on. I don't think Brooklyn had that. So I've given them a D. Very disappointing season. Very, very hard, I think, for them to actually mount any kind of hope of pushing for a playing spot next season as well. They're in a real shaky spot at the minute. Not real great signs there in Brooklyn. Let's go to Charlotte. I've given a D-. Now, the Hornets won just 21 games this season, going 21-61. That's bang average. That is bang average. 21-61. I tell you what, I know there's not many Hornets fans out there, barring none other than Mr. Lee Hancock. Hope you're well, brother. But I have no doubt in my mind it would have been a very long season for you. And it was horrible, the fact that we were cheated out of seeing LaMelo Ball for a big portion of that, which has been a common theme over the past couple of seasons. You've got a cornerstone guy, one of the most exciting guys within the league. But to be perfectly honest, before kind of doing my notes for this episode, I'd forgotten about LaMelo Ball as an NBA player. And that just speaks partly that the Hornets weren't relevant this year, and they haven't been relevant for the last few months due to not playing ball, but also because of LaMelo not being on the court. They had the league's worst point differential, but the only thing, despite having a slightly lower grade, a D- compared to a D for Brooklyn, there was some positivity there in Charlotte, and that was Brandon Miller. The number 2 pick in last year's draft averaged 17.3 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. And he could well be the player that they look to start building around if LaMelo can't stay healthy. I think he's probably on his last legs as a cornerstone guy, because you can have all the talent, all the marketability in the world, but if you're not on the court, it counts for very, very little. Whereas Brandon Miller is a guy who really kind of made this team his own as the season went on. Like, as I said, 17-4 and nearly 2.5 assists is nothing to sneeze at. And what we saw this season, I think he's only going to get better heading into the 2024-2025 season. But that's something to keep an eye on there in Charlotte, I think. Is there a bit of a passing of the torch potentially coming? Watch this space. The Chicago Bulls. A weird old year. I'd love to hear from our resident Bulls fan, Mr. Apex Fraser, Caleb there, what he thought of the Bulls season. I've given them a C, smack bang in the middle. To be honest, I thought they were pretty poor. It felt as if they were poor this season, yet they finished 9th with a 39-43 record. They faltered in the play-in, which was to be expected. Zach LaVine there missed a lot of time. He only played 25 games across the season. Lonzo Ball, another season without being on court. You're missing 2 of your star players. It kind of puts you in a pretty big hole early on. Yet I thought that young brigade that they've got brewing there in Pat Williams, Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, I thought they stood up big time. So I've given them like a relatively positive mark, given that they had an under 500 record. It was, it was pretty well expected. But as I said, the positive signs are a plus for them. I think they've probably made the right move transitioning to life without DeMar DeRozan. Still looking to move on from Zach LaVine. I think their timeline fits better with these guys, as I said, the Pat Williams, Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Josh Giddey now coming into the fold, moving on from Caruso there. I think that young core is what they build around, not the Zach LaVines, not the DeMar DeRozans, not the Nikola Vucevic of the world. I think they're heading in the right direction. So, yeah, it's a funny old year in Chicago. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, I've given a B minus. Now, they started the season slow, but really got things moving towards the middle of the season. They were hit pretty hard with injuries, as many teams were, but were able to steady to finish as the fourth seed with a 48-34 record. They were pushed to Game 7 by the Magic there in round one, were able to overcome that before faltering in 5 games to the eventual champions, the Celtics there. So no shame in that whatsoever, especially given that they did that without Donovan Mitchell. I think it was, again, a positive year without making too many improvements on the year prior. There is still concern about the Garland-Mitchell fit. A lot of talk about that heading into this off-season, whether they'd look to offload one or the other. Whichever way they go, this needs to be addressed ASAP. Either you push on with this current iteration or you move on from Garland. There is no way that you don't center this team around Mitchell. He's the guy that's going to win you a game, who's going to put the team on his shoulders. As I said, I think it's interesting to see how next season will go. Based on the players they've got at this point in time, I don't think there's that much room for improvement. Probably Mobley is the guy that you look at and think that could get a bit better. Likewise, Okoro. But I think their ceiling is just about capped out with this team. And especially as the East continues to get better, I think they're in that kind of second to third tier of contenders in the East. Nevertheless, a positive enough season there in Cleveland. We'll go to the opposite end of the spectrum. A team that did not have a positive year was the Detroit Pistons. I've given them an F+. When you're 14-68, it is very, very hard to find too many positives. I think the foundations of a solid core are there, though. If you look at Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Saw Thompson, Isaiah Stewart, all showed glimpses throughout the season, need to stay healthy. Cade Cunningham averaged 23 points, 4 rebounds, 7.5 assists, yet missed 20 games this season. They're a team that has, as I said, they have makings. There's potential there. No doubt about it. There is potential there. But potential counts for naught if it doesn't actually translate to anything. You can be the most talented, high potential player in the world, but often it can result in nothing. I really hope that's not the case with Detroit. They're a team that I think is one of the key things going into next season is they need to learn to be better in the clutch. To be honest, especially in the first part of the season, they were really quite competitive in a fair amount of these games, but they lacked the ability to close it out. I think it was against the Bucks. They held big leads. Can't quite recall off the top of my head, but there were multiple games where they held decent enough leads and were in games up until the bitter end, but just lacked that steadying presence. So I think that's certainly something they need to iron out heading into next season. That being said, not a lot of positives, so an F+ there on the 14-68 Detroit Pistons. Moving ahead to the Indiana Pacers, I've given a grading of B. 47-35 on the regular season. They overcame the Bucks in 6 games in round 1. They went down to the Knicks in Game 7 in a thrilling semi-final series there. That was must-watch TV, to say the least. But I think they looked super dangerous throughout the season and a lot more potent with Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner firing. Having those kind of dual bigs who are capable of handling the ball, getting a bucket, and actually, in Miles Turner's case, being able to hit that outside shot consistently, such a weapon. Halliburton was undeniably the star there. Elite with 20 points, 4 rebounds, 11 assists per game. He played 69 games across the season. If he had played, say, 75, they would have clinched home court. They just missed out finishing 4th there. But, yeah, I was finishing 6th, should I say. But as I said, with how close the East was this year, it was only a game or so difference between 3rd and 6th. So health is wealth, as they say. That being said, I think it was a fantastic season, a great outlook to next season. If that big three of Halliburton, Turner, Siakam can stay healthy in particular, They've become a serious threat in the East. As I said, Halliburton's one of my favourite guys within the league. I think he's an absolute stud. Pairing him with those guys, Turner and Siakam, and the other complementary players that they've got around them, I think good things are coming there in Indiana. Let's move ahead to South Beach, the Miami Heat. I've given it a C minus. Another underwhelming regular season, which has kind of become part of the identity of the Miami Heat over the last couple of years. They never kind of go out with intent to win a lot of regular season games. They finished 8th this year at 46 and 36 before going down 4-1 to the eventual champions, the Celtics. Not much you can do when you come up against a buzzsaw like that. But yeah, it was another team that was dealt with a pretty extensive list of injuries. But again, I think somewhat like the Atlanta Hawks, they're becoming a middling team within the East. I personally think that they're becoming further and further away from being a genuine threat in the league. As I said, they've been a team over the last couple of years that haven't had to do well in the regular season, but somehow pull it out in the playoffs. This year wasn't the case, and I think if things progress the way they are, I think they're just falling further behind. Starting to find themselves, and I hate to say it, they're starting to find themselves in that mediocre phase. Jimmy Butler, Bam, Tyler Hero, Terry Rozier coming into the fold as well. I just don't think it has the makings of a team that can go really deep in the East anymore. What do you reckon? Do you reckon they can? The East is certainly getting a lot better. Jimmy, I don't think quite has that dog in him enough to get this team over the line now. But yeah, I could see them falling into that mediocre phase next year. The Milwaukee Bucks. I'm very surprised to hear myself say this. They receive a D+, a negative grading, a D+ for the Bucks there. Expectations were extremely high once they acquired Dame Lillard. Linking up with Giannis there, I thought this was going to be the most dominant duo within the league. Having that combo of a small explosive guard who can just dominate from all corners of the floor, combined with an MVP level player in Giannis, who is probably the most athletic big man we've seen in recent memory in the NBA. I thought this was a match made in heaven. Didn't really eventuate. They registered a regular season record of 49 and 33, finishing third within the East, which is certainly serviceable. I don't think it looked convincing, though. They went out 4-2 in the opening round versus the Pacers. Unfortunately, Giannis and Dame missed extensive time within this. For me, I think they were a little bit too quick to move on from Adrian Griffin and bring Doc Rivers in. It's fantastic when you do that mid-season, like that. They weren't doing poorly at that point in time, the Bucks. You've ditched the head coach. You've brought in another big-name coach. A lot of expectation comes with that, and they certainly didn't live up to it. I think going into next season, they really need to sharpen up defensively. They want to be a title contender. I think they've still got the makings of a team befitting of winning the title, but their road certainly isn't getting any easier. I still have faith, but with Dame now 34 years of age, injury concerns for Giannis, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, there's a bit of concern there in Milwaukee at the moment, but this season was certainly negative with a D+. Let's go ahead to the New York Knicks. What a season they had. They receive an A grading for me. I think this was officially the year that the Knicks became a force once again. Across the regular season, they had a 50 and 32 record, good enough to clinch the number 2 seed. They beat Philly 4-2 in the opening round before going down in Game 7 versus the Pacers there. It was a real coming-of-age moment. They started the season at 17 and 15, and it looked pretty troubling there in New York. The natives were restless there in the Big Apple, and they made changes. They offloaded RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly, bringing in one of the most highly sought-after two-way players in the league in OG Anunoby. And they rallied extremely well. They missed Julius Randle, OJ as well, Mitchell Robinson for extensive periods of time. but still certainly outperformed expectations. And that was in big part to what Jalen Brunson was able to offer. He became a certified superstar this season, averaging 29 points, 3.5 rebounds, and nearly 7 assists per game. He's the star that the Knicks have been waiting for. Not since Carmelo Anthony has a guy been able to emote this much passion from the New York crowd. What he did was simply tremendous. He's combined with Josh Hart. They are the perfect players to fit in a Tom Thibodeau team. Josh Hart is all heart and soul and is more than capable to run out 48 minutes on any given night. I think there's very exciting things coming in New York at the moment, especially with the acquisition of Mikal Bridges, bringing on that Villanova Knicks. It is they're going to be must watch. I think for most people heading in on their league pass next season, they're going to be one of the top teams to watch. And the league is just better as a whole when the Garden's rocking, which it certainly is at the moment. So New York receive an A grading there. We'll move ahead to the Orlando Magic. I have given an A-. Now, from the 2022 to the 2023 season, the Magic jumped 12 wins on the record the year prior. Last season in the 2023 to 2024 season, they jumped a further 13 wins to finish the season with a 47-35 record, good enough to clinch the 5th seed there. No one in their right mind would have foresaw this. It was a real startling moment, I think, in the NBA season. The Magic finishing 5th. What? I think they established themselves as one of the most exciting young up-and-coming teams within the league. With Paolo Banchero there and Franz Wagner leading this team, they are cornerstone pieces to build around. With them leading the charge, Orlando are one of the most exciting teams to watch out for next season. Not just because of where they're at the moment, but their growth trajectory is probably, off the top of my head, probably second to OKC within the league in terms of young, fun, teams on the rise. You would have them under the Thunder, certainly, but they're probably number 2. Very, very competent team. Love what they did this offseason, although I'm not taking it into my grading, but acquiring KCP, I think that's the one thing they lacked a little bit last season. Real out-and-out shooters on the perimeter that can knock down and get you a bucket when you need it. Banchero, Wagner, they're going to be handling the rock predominantly. Having these guys like a KCP who's going to work hard defensively, but then can have an impact on the offensive end without needing the ball, they are a dime a dozen. So Orlando this season, though, an A-. We've got 3 teams to go. We'll bring it home with the Philadelphia 76ers. Given a C. I think it was another season of Philly underperforming, giving them a little let off due to injuries, but that is very minimal. They finished 7th this year with a 47-35 record. Equal 5th, though, essentially. That's how close the standings were. So the 7th looks pretty bad for optics, but overall, they weren't that bad as their standing suggests. They outlasted the Heat 105-104 in the play-in before going down 4-2 to the Knicks in the opening round. Embiid struggled with injury this year, and that hurt them. The reigning MVP, everything runs through him. So if he's not fit and firing and at 100%, it makes things very, very difficult. I thought Kelly Oubre, Tobias Harris, Nicholas Batum, Tyrese Maxey in particular, they gave them a chance, but it wasn't enough. On Maxey, though, he averaged 26 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, and he established himself somewhat like Brunson. He's probably a slight little half a tier below, but he established himself as one of the true stars within the league. I think if he can continue to build upon what he did this season, alongside hopefully a healthy Joel Embiid and Paul George coming into the fold, they should be much better positioned to make a red-hot crack at it next year. I think if you're a Philly fan, though, you see this year as a disappointment. As I said, hopefully Paul George signing is the catalyst for success. But, it's hard for me to show too much love to Philly because they're a team pretty much since the podcast's inception that I've thought would go on to do good things, and it just hasn't materialized. So I'll stick with a C there for them. 2 to go. We'll go the Toronto Raptors with a D+. Now, they finally made the shakeup that has been a long time coming, trading OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam away. Finished 12th at 25-57. To be fair, I haven't bumped them down too much, but I'm not stoked with what they got in return for these guys. I think they're probably, as I've spoken about, probably 12 to 18 months too late in this regard. But they've made the right move in starting afresh. They've now got a new semi-big three of Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett. It's not a big three that's going to take you that far, but it's a young big three. I think Barnes is certainly still the prize pick out of these guys. He had a pretty solid year with 20 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Yet there really wasn't too much else to be excited about there in Toronto. They're a team that I just feel they're probably going to be one of the teams that take the longest to bounce back. I think Scotty is a star without being a superstar at the moment. RJ Barrett's a solid piece. Emmanuel Quickley's a solid piece. But in terms of assets, in terms of other young players, there's not that much to be excited about in Toronto at the moment. And as I've spoken about a couple of times in this episode, teams in the East are only continuing to get better. I think the Raptors are a good couple of years away from actually making any noise, but I still commend them somewhat for actually making that plunge and embracing the rebuild. So fair play for that. D+ there in Toronto. And finally, the Washington Wizards. I've certainly not saved the best for last here. They received an F grading. It was a disaster. Finished 14th with a 15-67 record. It just went off a cliff. They were one of 3 teams to finish in the bottom 6 in both offensive and defensive rating and posted the 3rd worst net rating within the league. I think they had some talented enough players, but none of it clicked at all. Jordan Poole, I thought, was extremely ordinary. He looked a lot better the more the season went on and the less touches he got. You know, if you drew that into a graph, Jordan Poole usage, output, going on the negative. But if you did it the other way, the less touches he got, the better he was. And for me, going into this offseason, that should be a focal point. Get him playing better defensively and get him playing better off the ball. If you could mold him, and this is a high watermark, it is not realistic at all, but if you could mold him into somewhat like a KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope there, that would be fantastic. Don't think that's going to happen, but that's what I would love to see and envisage for his future. If you were going to tweak his game, that's the route I would go with it. They tanked enough to get the number 2 pick there, which got them Alex Sarr, fresh off his stint in the NBL with the Perth Wildcats. Yet the class leading into the draft, it wasn't exceptional. It didn't have any, unbelievable talent like Victor Wembanyama the year prior, Scoot Henderson. I think they've waited somewhat like Toronto. They've waited a little bit too long to embrace this kind of capitulation. And somewhat like Toronto as well, I think they're in for a long next couple of years. I would hate to be a Washington Wizards fan at the moment, but as the expression goes, the night is darkest just before the dawn. So here's hoping that the dawn is nearly here for Wizards fans. I personally don't think so, but it's a fool's hope nevertheless. Guys, there you have it. That wraps up all 15 teams from the Eastern Conference, going through and grading them based on the season that was. Next week, I will bounce back and tackle the Western Conference, which is certainly sure to spark a lot of debate, as most of the chatter around the Western Conference does. Love to hear from you guys what you thought of my gradings on this show, though. What I got right, what I got wrong. Be sure to hit me up on the socials, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok to let me know your thoughts, as well as keeping up to date with all the latest news from the NBA and the NBL. The chatter is starting to build on the NBL front, so very excited about that. Hope you guys are keeping up to date with it. Looking forward to a bumper season from that too. Guys, my voice is starting to get a little bit hoarse there, so I reckon that's a good cue for me to wrap it up. Hope you all have a fantastic week. Enjoy a little bit of downtime before basketball starts to ramp up once again with the Olympics just around the corner. Until next week, have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.